Hello, welcome to the Pocono Liars Club. Once more, we're having another interview, and this day we're dealing with none other than David Gerrold, who you should all know. But if you don't, we're going to talk a little bit about him. He is obviously a New York Times best-selling, award-winning author who's written many, many books and has written for television, and which is one of the reasons we're going to be talking today, because the topic today is going to be about writing for television, and let's talk about the strike that's going on and what it all means. David has written for Star Trek, the original series, The Next Generation, Babylon 5, Twilight Zone, what am I forgetting? Sliders, Land of the Lost.
Superboy, Tales from the Dark Side. Oh yeah, created Land of the Lost for Sid and Marty Krofft. Bunch of stuff.
Yeah, so he's got the experience, ladies and gentlemen. David, hello.
Yeah,
thanks for coming
hi.
on. I appreciate it. I'd like to have you talk a little bit about how you got involved in the first place, if you don't mind giving a little bit of bio for me. I do remember, I read your Trouble with Tribbles book, which talks
thank you. I don't have a copy to hand to hold up, so thank you. Yeah, basically, you need to understand the TV industry in the 50s grew out of the radio industry because there were half-hour and hour-long radio shows. And Charlie, you're going back to the medical research lab tomorrow. So you had the half-hour shows like Jack Benny, and then you had CBS Theater, and you had a few others, and they were great. And you would listen to the radio while you were driving in the car, or you would be at home washing the dishes, or mom would be knitting, or dad would be working on something, and the radio was. And your pictures were your imagination. And I have to tell you, it was I'm old enough to remember listening to the radio. There's Jack Benny in particular, who was, and then television came along, and here you had these three networks. Actually, for a while you had four. The DuPont network existed for a while. And they suddenly discovered they needed to fill these hours and hours of television time, and they grabbed the radio scripts. Jack Benny recycled a lot of his radio scripts, and like one of the most famous was going down and seeing the Jack Benny's Vault, which worked great when it was your imagination, did not work great when they had to show it on TV. And then they redid it as an episode of Here's Lucy, which was even worse. But in the 50s, you had all these half-hour shows. I Married Joan, December Bride. I can't even remember the names of the Stuart Father. And these were great little half-hour sitcoms. And they worked very well. And then the dramas were things like Alfred Hitchcock and Twilight Zone, which were half-hour shows into the 60s. But then the networks discovered a very interesting thing. And this is how I got in. Watch this. You could do 2 half-hour shows for, let's say, $100,000. I'm just making the number up. But you could do a show for $70,000 because you would amortize the cost of the actors, the sets, the costumes, the props, the whatever. So it was actually cheaper to do an hour-long episode of Gunsmoke or Maverick, and Gunsmoke went from half hour to hour. And later on, it got a little more expensive when they shifted. And that was the 60s, we're moving into the end. By the way, some half-hour shows didn't work very well as an hour. Alfred Hitchcock and Twilight Zone did not work as an hour. And when they did Night Gallery, they broke it up into mini episodes within that, in the time slot. So, because that was the only way. These were short stories. They don't stretch out to an hour. An hour works great for a novella or a novel even. So we had only 4,000 members in the Screenwriters Guild. By the way, to get the Screenwriters Guild started was so dangerous to the studios at that time that there were studio goons beating up protesters with strikers.
What year was that? About what year?
Probably 49.
Okay.
49, 50, somewhere in there. I was only 5 or 6, so I wasn't on the strike lines then. But I would have been. All right, anyway. So there weren't a lot of screenwriters who understood the hour-long format, even into the 60s. And it showed. And there were some who got the format right. But when it comes to a show like Star Trek, there was a limited number of writers who understood science fiction as well as the hour-long format. And Harlan Ellison told Gene Roddenberry, hire science fiction writers who know how to do a script. And Roddenberry had listened to that. By the way, I listened to that when we did Land of the Lost. I hired writers who knew their science fiction. So I came along as I've been reading science fiction 9 years old, obsessive compulsive reader. Everything that had been published or printed or available in the public library, I had gone through at least once. And even the magazines, I would go to the used bookstores and I had a full collection of Galaxy and FNSF and Astounding all the way back to whatever. And so I knew my science fiction. And I had gone to USC Film School and I knew script format. And I had already written a feature-length script, not a great one, but I'd written one. And so I understood structure. In fact, I got the only A that Erwin R. Blacker ever gave out. So I submitted outlines to Bonanza and would have sold, except the guy, Skip Webster, the story editor, looked at me and decided I was 12 years old and not ready for prime time. The following year, I submitted outlines to Star Trek. And Gene L. Kuhn, God bless that man, decided to take it. And I demonstrated, and I stumbled into, and I learned a lot, and I had to learn a lot on my feet, but I understood how to make stories work for the Star Trek form. And so the Trouble with Tribbles episode, which began as a fuzzy thing happened to me, but eventually was, Gene said, we can't call them fuzzies because of conflict with Little Fuzzy. I said, all right. And I went home and made up a bunch of words. And Tribbles, all right, we'll call them Tribbles, and I'll call the episode Trouble with Tribbles. Next meeting with Gene, I said, that's what I said. I said, we'll call the critters Tribbles, and we'll call the episode The Trouble with Tribbles. And he said, okay. And that was it. That was it. You'd think there would be a whole big discussion. No, there wasn't. It was like, if it works, we'll do it.
But I think what's
I proved myself. Go ahead.
What's interesting is that some TV shows have staffs that write their episodes. You know, they have like a writer's room. Yes, but even back then there were no staffs. There was no
writing room. There was Gene Roddenberry, who was executive producer, and he would write a script whenever he wanted. There was Gene L. Kuhn, who was the showrunner and the line producer, and he was in charge of putting all the pieces together. And then there was the story editor, Montana, who was probably the most important person in the entire history of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Underrated, uncredited, truly a value. And, you know, if you didn't listen to Dorothy, you were a jerk. And so it was all freelancers. And with Land of the Lost, it was all freelancers. This whole thing about writers' rooms only started with shows like, I guess, maybe it was Hill Street Blues and LA Law, somewhere in there. Aaron Sorkin's shows started. Aaron Sorkin would have a writer's room. They would come up with everything and he put his name on it and do the final draft and take the credit. Which is not exact. There was brilliant stuff. Aaron Sorkin's a brilliant man, but your writers in the writers' room, that was a good job. I mean, because you were there for the run of the show.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm interested in, because, you know, it sounds like for many years it was an independent thing. You sold a script and then you just were poor until you sold the next script, as opposed to a writer's room where at least you got a regular salary. That's unusual.
Yes, and if you were on staff, a story editor or line producer, you knew you were going to get 2 or 3 scripts a year in addition to your paycheck. So Land of the Lost, I was getting, and mind you, this is a Saturday morning show, not prime time. I was getting something like $3,000 a week, and then $3,000 for every script I wrote. And but it was you know, I hired the best writers I could, so I wouldn't have to do as much work. Even so, I collaborated on 2 of those scripts with Larry Niven because it was just too much work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't get a residual for being the story editor, but I got a residual off of the scripts that I had my name on. So being on staff and getting the script credit was critical because that's where the residuals are determined. They asked me, Gene Kuhn asked me if I wanted to put Imud up for arbitration and possibly to have my name on the credits. And I said, no, this is Stephen Kendall's script. I am not going to break his rice bowl. That's a Chinese term. But I believe that I had been trained by Erwin R. Blacker and Gene Kuhn and Dorothy Fontana that you brought ethics to the room.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's ethics in the room anymore by some of these little fetuses in suits that are writing for television. One of them had the gall to say, oh, I would never hire, and I'm not mentioning the name, I would never hire, it'd be like working with my dad. It's like, dude, working with your dad has experience as a screenwriter and knows what his mistakes and is smart enough to say, well, let's not do that. Let's do something surprising. That was where I lucked out on Land of the Lost. I had Ted Sturgeon, I had Dorothy Fontana, I had Larry Niven and Ben Bova, Walter Koenig, Norman Spinrad writing scripts. They didn't do a bad job. They did a great job on a Saturday morning show. And our instruction was the same one Dorothy Fontana gave us on Star Trek Animated, write a primetime episode that we can show on Saturday morning. Essentially, don't write something that's inappropriate for the kids. Otherwise, go for it. And there are, and even then, Star Trek Animated ran into 40 Enraged Baptists didn't want, oh my God, you can't do The Magics of Magus 2 by Larry, can't remember his last name. Someone look it up because it showed the devil as a night guy.
Yeah,
it's like,
I remember.
And it's like some of these religious fanatics, you just want to slap the stupid out of them until you realize it's stupid all the way down and you're just going to hurt your hand.
So what's it like?
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to write for television, are there other opportunities, or do you have to be?
Not for me. I'm too old. Like, I want to work with my grandpa. And not only that,
anyone else out there, anyone else.
The writers' room is filled with friends of the producer. It's like, gee, I joked with some of my friends who are producing shows. I said, when the strike is over, I'm not dead. I'll remember that. Yeah, okay. I'm not expecting my phone to ring. So
it's an insider.
And I will share this. Gene Roddenberry was so pissed at me and his lawyer. They spread there's no blacklist. Instead, they said, oh, he's very difficult to work with. Well, difficult to work with means I won't let you walk all over me, as I have standards, have integrity. They did it to Harlan Ellison too. Yeah. Harlan Ellison was making a lot of money in television movies until Gene Roddenberry said, oh no, he's very difficult to work. I tried to get Harlan on board on a show and the producer said, oh no, he's very difficult to work. I said, I know Harlan, I can work with him. No. Don't even call him. And so what you lose then is somebody with enough integrity to tell a story that they, as Gene Roddenberry once promised on Next Gen, write the story that sticks in your craw that no one else will let you write. It's like, and then Next Gen turned into, Rick Berman was there and said, oh, we can't do that. Mommy's will write. I said, Rick, the whole point is Star Trek is an issue show. If we can't do issues, why are we doing it?
Well, some of the new ones are better, I think. So they got
some of the new people, and I give them and some of the people who have been connected with Trek, God bless them, they did a great job of bringing back the spirit of let's get out and explore the galaxy. I'm not interested in any more stories about Vulcans, Romulans, and Klingons. Yeah, okay, we got that. Tell me what else is out there. Then I get interested and excited.
All right, let's talk a little bit about one of the main reasons I wanted to interview was just to talk about what it's like and about what it's like being a writer and why they are on strike right now. Let me ask you a question about something else too. I mean, the news shows are still going on. Don't they have writers? I don't know.
Well, they're still in production with the scripts they bought before the strike. They're going to run out of scripts pretty soon. Like
Rachel Maddow and people like that. I mean, they must have writers.
I don't know. I think Rachel Maddow is covered by a different guild.
Okay, all right, that's what I was wondering about, and I wasn't.
Yeah, there are different guilds.
Like Stephen Colbert, those shows are definitely off because those writers are covered by the same guild, correct?
Yeah.
That's a little bit different than writing.
But let me say, I've done this rant many times. I might as well do it one more time. Bob Iger is the CEO of Disney, and he's pulling down something like $31 million a year, which is more money than spend in a lifetime unless they were an absolute profligate spendthrift. But it's 31 million a year. And God knows what his golden parachute is. Because there are always bonuses for the CEO. Oh, here's some money to lessen, okay. So he makes $75,000, more than $75,000 every day. He doesn't even have to show up, and he makes $75,000 every day. Script writer in Hollywood makes $69,000 a year. The average actor makes $40,000 a year. So, and one of the members of the AMPTP who generously was in his, or cowardly in his comments said, well, yes, we'll keep the strike going until they start losing homes, and then they'll be desperate enough to table. It's cruel, but it's necessary. And the reason why he was so bold to not put his name on it is because we still have torches and pitchforks left over from Frankenstein, 1933. So, and we will use them, metaphorically, okay? So it's like Bob Iger says, realistic for writers and actors to go on strike. Oh, really? Yeah, come on, man, Bob Iger works for a mouse, and he's telling us what's realistic.
It's ridiculous to think that people see movie stars getting $1 million and not realizing that's 1% of all the actors. And same thing with writers. A writer will get
not even 1%. It's 1/10 of 1% of the. I mean, you can talk about Brad Pitt and George Clooney and Dwayne Johnson and you can talk about high-profile directors like Steven Spielberg, and somebody says, "Oh, a Spielberg movie? Oh, we'll definitely get it $500 million, even if it's a flop." Okay, yeah, we'll greenlight that up to 200 million, right? And because they want the tent poles and franchises, and which is okay if you're manufacturing McBurgers. You want the audience to come back over and over and over, but you're not going to get Citizen Kane. You're not going to get Lawrence of Arabia. You're not going to Sing It in the Rain. You're not going to get King Kong. You're not going to get the movie by people who love movies. The glory days of Hollywood, and yeah, there were abuses of the writers and actors, but the glory days of Walt Disney, you had Leo G. Mayer, you had Sam Goldwyn, you had Harry Cohn, you had Jack Warner, you had guys who, I mean, even if you go down to the second tier, like Roger Corman, you had guys who loved making movies. Okay. And that's how the movies got made, because guys loved movies. Now you have corporations, big corporations like Coca-Cola, owning the studios, and they don't care what movies are being made. They care how much money the studio is making. Miniseries called The Offer, which is about the making of the other movie. And Charles Bluhdorn, who owned Paramount at the time as a subsidiary of Viacom or somebody, he's halfway through the series. He's saying, "We got to sell this. We got to sell. I'm not happy with and he's not interested in the money or the movie. Not interested in the movie. He's only interested in his bottom line." And he's beautifully played by an actor named Vern Gorman, who I've met, who's a really, really good actor. He was on Torchwood. He's shown up in a bunch of other stuff. Pacific Rim. He's a great actor. I believe Charles Bluhdorn was a jerk. he did it beautifully. And he was. But to be a writer now, and this is where what the AMPTP does not understand, or an actor, is you have to have an alternate source of income. And I discovered early on, way back, this is my 6th strike. So, okay, we're going on strike. No problem. I'll go home. I'll write some short stories. I'll work on my novels. I'll sell some novels. And in those days, the economy was such, you could $3,000, and that was enough money to last for 6 months, if you were frugal. So I wasn't like, and then you were still getting residuals from shows that were covered by the 1973 contract. There were some residuals involved from Tribbles and Land of Lost and other shows. So you could live very well as a writer, particularly because you would always develop other sources of income because you couldn't depend on the studios. The studios discovered when they had by inventing the writer's room, it would slow down the strikes because the writers who were in the writer's room wouldn't want to go on strike and lose their weekly paycheck of 3,000, 5,000, whatever they were getting. That was good money. So that slowed down the guild wanting to go on strike. But the industry kept changing. Every time the industry changed, every time we won an advance in one contract, the studios would find a way around the contract. So they invented the writers. We got a big advance for the freelancers. They invented the writers' room. And then they invented this thing called the pre-show, where you get a bunch of writers into a room to do a show before it's greenlit, and they don't get paid the same scale as they would get paid if they're. And sometimes they don't even get to go on once the show is sold. So the guild wants to stop that particular practice. The other thing we want to do is make sure that AI is not used unless a writer, a human being, is involved, because AI, some of the uses of it have been miraculous and absolutely wonderful. And some of it, when you ask it to be creative, what you get is a recycling of stuff that has been created by other people. Your AI is not going to come up with an offer you can't refuse. It's not going to come up with that last line of Some Like It Hot, nobody's perfect. It's not going to come up with that inspired, wonderful piece of insight, wisdom that only a human being comes up with, because human beings see different kinds of patterns. AI sees the patterns that exist. Human beings see the patterns that they're experiencing, and that is different, very different. But the industry is shifting to digital, first digital, and now AI. And so one of the examples is a thing called the Unreal Engine, where they have this giant circular, which is linked to the camera. So you can move the camera, and a pre-designed background is on the screen if the camera shifts to match. So you put your actor, you don't have to go on location to a desert or a jungle or whatever costume. You put maybe some props in front of the, and it's expensive to set up, but it's cheaper than going on location. They've been doing it with The Mandalorian and some of the other Star Wars stuff. And eventually that's going to be a standard in every studio. There will be several Unreal Engine stages on every
that affects all the technical people, not necessarily the writers or the actors, but that's going to
it affects the location people.
Yeah,
you're not going to need your location.
You're not going to need
You're not going to need your location. You're going to need your craft services on location. You're not going to need your insurance. You're not going to need your housing. You're not going to need your travel. You're not going to need the buses. You're not going to need the vehicles. And you shoot it on stage, and what you get is the incomes to the technical people who create the backgrounds. So there are jobs there, but what happens is the old way of making movies disappears. A lot of the studios have torn down their back lots. Paramount had a beautiful back lot for a while. Columbia's back lot still exists, but I don't know how much longer because the land is more valuable. Warner's has a great back lot still, and they use it. Universal has a great back lot, they use it, but 20th, the ranch where they shot MASH and a bunch of other things like Planet of the Apes, all that is gone. It's turning into housing. Century City used to be 20th Century Fox's back lot, but the land was too valuable in the heart of Los Angeles, and so now you have another suburb where you didn't need one and more traffic. I listed, I wrote a thing, I don't have it in front of me, the industries that depend. See, the AMPTP, they didn't just shut out the actors and the writers, they've shut out props, costumes, makeup, hair, they've shut out set builders and carpenters and painters and electricians and lighting. They've shut out editors, sound crew, craft services, all of the people in the various offices who make the paperwork. They've shut out all of the people who provide the goods and services and supplies to all of these people, because you don't just, costumes need fabric and sets need lumber and so on and on. So all of the supply chain has been shut down, and people outside of the industry were taking a hit, not just the writers and actors, taking a hit, a big hit in the city a big hit in the state, a big hit in the national economy that we're not going to feel for a while. And the AMPTP, and I'm not the only one who feels this. It is not about the money, because they're making they're making billions. The CEOs of the AMPTP companies are making the highest wages of CEOs in the history of the entire industry. And they could easily, each one of them could give up 1% of their earnings, and that would more than cover what the guilds are asking for. We're asking for a living wage and a human involvement and the changes of certain, and they won't even come to the negotiation.
Yeah, they're not even.
So it's not about the money, it is about the power. They want to be feudal lords and dictate what we can and can't do. And this is, go ahead.
Tell me a little bit about the strike is also based on residuals and things like that. And could you explain to anyone listening what that means, what residuals are? How long do they last anyway, you know? On
the table behind me, which you can't see, there's a basket into which I put incoming checks. Most of the stuff just comes to PayPal now, but I got a residual check last week for a whole $1. I can't even buy a coffee at Starbucks for that. I can't even buy dog food. When I was living by myself way back I had a little tiny apartment half a block from Paramount, and it was $50. Food was 15 cents a day. So the dog always ate. I always had enough money for the dog. Say, that residual check would not pay for a can of dog food for my dog. I'm sorry, Charlie, you're starving to death. Too bad. Blame the AMPTP. Like, so
is there a year? I mean, if you wrote something in 1970, are you still getting residuals from it, or is it a cutoff point at some point? And how does that work? I'm just, In
1970, it was you got a residual for the first rerun, then you got a reduced residual for the second rerun. You got about 5 reruns before you were out.
Okay.
And that was big money at the time, because it was good money. Some of those residual checks were lifesavers at the time. How to write a novel, those residual checks kept me going. I also had given a lot of my money to my mom. She was dealing with my dad's death and keeping his business running until she could sell it. So it was like, so I was funding her. So if I hadn't had to do that, I would have been in better shape. But we survived. We made it work. But see, here's the thing, the point I wanted to make, and of all of this, everybody who works, and I in the true sense of the word work in the entertainment is partners. We are not labor. We are not costs. We are not people you hire to flip burgers at McDonald's. And by the way, that's an honorable job, deserves a living wage too. It's hard work standing over a hot grill. I've done it. I know, not McDonald's, but I've done it. Let me tell you this. We are partners in a creative industry. There are not very many creative industries, but we are partners in that industry. Without the writers, all you have is a bunch of naked people standing around in a large, dark, empty room with nothing to say. Without the actors, you don't even have people to say something. And what we want essentially is a paycheck that shows that we are respected for our contribution. We are not guys on an assembly line. Men and women on an assembly line. We're not people on an assembly line. We are creative partners. And the AMPTP, because they are owned by corporations that are only looking at the bottom line, they think we're like a manufacturing factory, and we're not. We're a creative factory. In the entertainment industry, and I just wrote a long screed on this that I posted on Facebook and also on my Patreon page, if anybody wants to look, entertainment is not a luxury. It is part of who we are as a culture. Even cultures that are in their most desperate poverty levels have entertainment. Even if they sit around and have a drum circle or a singing circle or whatever, they find ways to entertain themselves, because that is what sets us apart from every other species on the planet. Not just that we play, but our play is structured to be entertainment. Entertainment is how we codify our culture. It's how we honor the past, remember the past. It's how we point ourselves to the future. It's a mirror that we look at ourselves. What are our obstacles and what are our challenges? What are our aspirations? That's what entertainment is. Entertainment is not another cartoon another 2.5 hours of people beating each other up with guns and knives and swords and whatever. It is not that. Entertainment is that thing that lets you, that sticks at the roof of your mind like peanut butter and says, mental peanut butter, and says, and says, here is something to think about. Like The Godfather. I mean, when was The Godfather? 1972. We're still talking about it today because it's a meta. We're still singing the songs from Singing in the Rain. We're still talking about Citizen Kane, and we're still laughing like crazy people at Buster Keaton's The General, which is the one of, are still honoring the history of film. And by the way, anybody who does old movies, I don't want to watch old movies. They are missing.
Yes.
We didn't get here by accident. We got here by standing on the shoulders of great men and great women, and over and over. And this is true in the science fiction genre, but it's specifically true with movies. Orson Welles said, a movie studio is the greatest electric train set anybody ever had to play with. And he's right. Movies are all of the arts combined into one. There's music, there's painting, there's imagery, there's dancing, there's writing, there's singing. It's all of the arts in a single place. And you're not going to get studios taking chances on any independent production because they'll look at the computer numbers and say, well, nobody has ever done this before, so it won't make any money. It's like nobody has ever done 2001 before. And while the picture it seemed to be a flop in its first few weeks, it stayed at the Hollywood Warner Theater for 2 years and is more than enough because it became a cult favorite. Studios don't understand cult favorites. They didn't understand Night of the Living Dead. They didn't understand Rocky Horror Picture Show. They don't understand that creativity will find its niche, but you need to give creativity the place to find its niche.
Do you think, just topping, do you think this these two strikes are a sign of what's happening in the country as a whole? More people are willing to join unions and fight back now?
Yes. Now look, I want to make a point, and then I'm going to answer your question directly. The studios knew that these two contracts were expiring at the same time. 2 years ago, they knew these strikes were coming. They could have made the appropriate changes and stayed in business. They could have negotiated fairly. Instead, they walked away from the negotiating table as a sign of strength. You call that strength, walking away? No, strength is sitting down and talking. You know, alpha males is that's, by the way, that's an illusion, but alpha males don't behave. We have a visitor here. This is traditional that the kids have to, hi, sweetie. This is my beautiful granddaughter. And she doesn't understand the Skype or Zoom yet, but she will. So anyway.
So Chinese is close. What do you want from Subway?
Veggie delight.
Okay. With what on it?
Cucumber, tomato, pickles, olives, and oil.
All right. Can you write that down?
Okay. Sorry, we got arranging dinner here.
Of course, you know, the different time zones and everything. How does, let me ask you about writing, just in general, if I can. How does writing,
hold on.
There's a lot of limitations when you have to write for television.
Well, the cards on the
Okay.
Different than if you wrote a novel, because with the novel you can write about anything, but with TV you're limited with time and budget.
Okay. All right. With a novel, you are in charge. And what happened there? All right. With a novel, you're in charge. So you get to do not just the dialogue and the plotting, you get to do the art direction, do the music, you have to do everything, but you get to do everything. With a movie, you say, okay, we are in the living room and here's Joe and Fred and Denise, and they're talking about the storm. And then you do your dialogue. And everybody else fills in what the house looks like and who the actors are going to be and how they're going to say everything. So with a movie or a TV show, you're part of a committee. And if it's a really great one, you're part of a team, and which is wonderful. And we had that on the original Star Trek. We were part of a team. We had that to some degree on the original Land of the Lost. Had it on Babylon 5. There were a couple other shows I've been on where it was not a team effort. But where you have people recognizing that it's a team aligned on a common purpose, you get great television or movies. Where you get people who are showing up to collect a paycheck, they don't care. They're just going to go through, they're just going to slice something off the same old sausage. What was wrong with the first 2 years of Star Trek Next Generation? With a novel, you have freedom. You can be dangerous. You can be out. You can, for instance, if I wanted to write back in 1987, when I wanted to put gay characters on Next Generation, Rick Berman said, "Oh no, we can't. We're going to get people complaining." Even though Gene Roddenberry had promised that it was time to do that, Rick Berman outvoted him. Which by me, I would have fired Rick Berman at that point. We're doing an issue show. So when I turned that into a novel, not only did I do the gay characters, I expanded on that relationship. When we did it as a fan in 2007, Blood and Fire, you can find it on YouTube. We expanded it again where Peter Kirk is James T. Kirk's nephew. And we expanded that relationship and actually showed them in bed together. And we had some fans complaining, "Oh my God, I'm in favor of diversity, but it has to be normal diversity." And I had to that fan, excuse me. But we knew it was dangerous to be courageous, but if you're not being courageous, then what are you doing? And that was why I left Next Generation. If I'm not allowed to be courageous in my writing, I don't want to be here. And I learned that from Robert A. Heinlein and Harlan Ellison and Dorothy Fontaine and Richard Matheson and Robert Bloch and a lot of writers who set the standard for courage. And I wanted to stand with giants. And I wanted to be known as a writer who was not afraid. Hang on a minute. What do you need?
I'm just gonna borrow your car, okay, that's it.
Oh, take my car.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
yeah.
Did you ever end up on a show where you did feel like you had that kind of power?
Land of the Lost. We did stories that were totally not expected for Saturday morning.
Mhm.
And we did, and Land of the Lost was that Babylon 5. Harlan and Joe wanted me to do the Jehovah's Witness story that parents won't let the doctor operate on the kid.
Right.
Oh God, no! I was like, I don't want to do that. And two things about that. First, I realized, okay, there's only one way I'll do this story. We're going to kill the kid. Everybody is so wrapped up in their own belief system that they don't honor, and the kid dies.
Right.
And the episode is called Believers. And then when I was writing it, I realized why they wanted me to do that, because in the middle of writing one key scene, very disturbing scene, I had to get up and check to make sure my son Sean was okay. And because the thought of losing him was unbearable. And even today, it's still, I love that kid so much. We just had a great day today. We both had a lot of upsets today, and then we sat and just talked. It was a great afternoon. But yeah, it's.
Speaking of Sean.
Yes.
Did you have any,
Sean,
when they made The Martian Child into a film, did you have anything to say about that? Did you have any? I
wrote 100,000 words of memos. I had my own script version, which they said, "Oh, we're not going to read it. We're going to develop our own." And we needed the money at the time. It was one of the few times when I sold out when I should have said, "I don't need the money this badly." But I thought they were going to listen to me. They promised, "Oh yeah, we want your input." Well, they ignored me. And I wrote memo after memo after memo. And finally, there was one, they had a scene in their script that was so wrong that I said, "You put this scene in the final movie and I will spend every nickel I have taking out ads apologizing to my friends in the science fiction community for the way you have portrayed it." And ultimately, Menno Magis, who's a very good director, came aboard and rewrote the script. But I was held at arm's length. I was not allowed to have any input. And in fact, they told me, "Oh, we never read your novel. This is all based on your short," which is crap. because there are things in the movie that were only in novel. The death of the dog, the running away at the end, that's only in the novel. And I said, you know what, you guys, this movie's going to fly. Oh, and then one of the producers said, you shouldn't have put you're gay in the novel because it's going to, the backlash is going to be against you. I said, nah, backlash is going to be against you for straight character in the movie. And sure enough, I would say about at least half the reviews pointed out, those that mentioned the novel pointed out, why did you straight wash this? It would have been a much more powerful movie if you'd have had about a gay dad adopting a kid.
Yeah.
And so I was not happy. It's not a bad movie, it's a stupid movie, because none of what they showed about writing is accurate. The guy lived in a house with no book. Look behind you. You have shelves of books. If we weren't packing to move, behind me would be a wall of books. They're all in storage right now. The guy lives in a house with no books, right? It's sterile. All of the things he does with the kid are bad parenting. I did 2 years of research about good parenting because, you know, you don't want to damage the little kid. And the worst mistake is he adopted a kid to fill a hole in his life. And you don't adopt a kid because you're missing something. You adopt a kid to fill a hole in his life, to give him a chance at having or a mom and a dad, or two moms or two dads. And I will tell you, you know, I said to Sean just this afternoon, I said, I don't feel like a hero. I know I'm a hero, but I don't feel like a hero. I just did what was necessary. I took on a kid because I wanted a family. But we talked about, we broke the cycle the cycle of abuse and neglect, and without a dad who cared about him, God knows where that poor little guy would end up. And now today he is an amazing dad, and he works on himself to be a good dad better than anybody I have ever known, including me. And I worked on to be a good dad.
How does that work? You sold the rights. You don't get residuals from the movie. You just sold the rights.
Well, the movie flopped. If the movie had made some money, I would get a residual.
Okay, all right. Well,
but the movie flopped so badly that I got a letter from the studio saying, we're not going to send you residual reports every 3 months. We're only going to do it once a year because the movie's never going to earn out. I said, of course not.
Well, yeah, Hollywood has a way of writing things off so that lots of movies don't make a profit when they actually do, though, don't they?
Oh, yeah. Star Trek, the original series, was making this extraordinary profit. But they were always charging new expenses off against Star Trek, the original series, so it never earned out. Gene Roddenberry is on the golf course with a Paramount lawyer, early 80s, I believe. And the lawyer said, let's make it interesting, $100 on the next hole. And Gene said, let's make it even more interesting. My royalties on Star Trek, how much do you think they might be? And the way I heard the story, the lawyer looked to the left, looks to now, mind you, they're in the middle of the golf course, there isn't anybody, and says probably about $30 million. Studio accounting is by the way, that's one of the reasons for the strike, is the streaming services way back when said, we don't know if this is going to be profitable, right? This goes all the way back. We don't know if VHS is going to be profitable. We're asking for, give us a break. So we don't know if DVDs are going to be profitable. Give us, and then we have to go on strike to get a fair residual. So they said, we don't know if streaming will give us it. So we gave them a break. And now that the streaming services are bragging about bringing in billions and billions of dollars, we're saying, can we have our fair share? Oh, no, we're losing money. No, you're not. The real issue for Netflix and Amazon is that they don't want to open their books to the accountants and show how much they're making and how much they owe. They don't want to show that. They say, hey, we're giving you, come in here, you get $200. Do you know Bob Cratchit was earning a living wage? When you figure out what Bob Cratchit was in, like 15 bob a week, something like that, it was actually good money in Ebenezer Scrooge's time. So,
that's their argument.
Huh? but what it wasn't enough to take care of Tiny Tim. But it's like, but the studios, we should be happy with the pittance. Believe me, I'm not happy with it. Look at. Let me give you an example. McDonald's started out. You could go to McDonald's and get a 15-cent hamburger. That was where they started. All right, you get you get hamburger and fries were so you get 2 hamburgers, there's 30 cents, and a dime, and a Coke was another dime, 50 cents. You could fill yourself up. And believe me, I was grateful that I had the 50 cents to go to McDonald's. There were days when even, 40 cents, 15 cents for a can of dog food for Dog, that was his name, and 25 cents for a dried out burrito at the Hollywood Ranch Market. But in those days, you weren't desperate. You weren't afraid of being homeless. You knew that, like, oh, and there was a time I sold an article for $50, and so it's the only piece of my writing that is too lucky. And that $50 paid rent. And then I had $100 mistake in my checkbook. I had $100. Yeah,
I'm losing you, David.
Sold.
I don't know how it is on your end, but on my end, it's suddenly stopped. I'm not seeing you at all. I'm hearing an and I see an empty chair.
Hang on, I just diddled my. Hang on, let me make sure. All right, apparently I'm connected. Okay, my internet connection is unstable. Yeah, because I just rebooted it.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, but back in the early 70s, you could buy a car, a good car, for $1,000. It'd be a used car. You can buy a good used car for $300. Now you want to go shopping for a car. You want a new car? It's $50,000, and that's not even top of the line. That's just a mid. It's like, how is anybody supposed to be able to afford being,
That's the whole problem in all of America.
They've erased the middle class. We no longer have a middle class.
Exactly.
And that goes back to Reaganomics, which made it possible for the wealthy to loot the economy. Something like $3 trillion has been taken out of the economy. Somebody pointed out, you give $100 to a rich man, he invests it. That creates jobs. I said, you give $100 to a poor man, he spends it. Yeah, he spends it at the corner grocery. He spends it at the gas station. He spends it here and there. And that money goes, that money has far more liquidity. It flows a lot farther until it ends up in the hands of the rich man who, what investment? Does it come back to the street level? No.
No.
We had a living wage. The minimum wage was supposed to be a living wage, and that's where it was when it started. Now, I'm trying not to say what I think of the pernicious, greedy assholes who are arguing that the minimum wage is a starter wage for teenagers. No, it's not. No. It's not. And you go into McDonald's and you don't see teenagers working there. You see people who are desperate working there. Minimum wage needs to be at $30 an hour now to keep up with inflation.
Yeah, and not just minimum wage, but general wages. And the part of the problem is unions have been killed. And so what happens, of course, is that, usually when the economy improves, salaries improve. And what's happened is the economy improves and salaries have stayed the same, and we can't afford stuff.
It's a study of 40 global economies. And this is not recent news. This is about 5 or 10 years old. Study of 40 global, but the information hasn't changed. Showed that in the 40 nations that had the strongest union activity, strongest labor movements, also had the strongest economies. Mm-hmm. And you would think that the multimillionaires and the billionaires, the 1%, would say, gee, what can we do to have a stronger economy? What can we do to have a healthy economy? We can make more money. And actually, the stock market does better with a Democratic administration. God knows why the Republicans are, the multimillionaires are funding the Republicans who want to further loot the economy. What are they creating? Desperation. It's like, if I were an activist, I would show up in front of Congress with a guillotine as a warning. This is where we're headed. The French Revolution, unfortunately,
they don't want to be taxed is the main problem. Reagan dropped the tax so hugely. We're getting off on a big tangent here, but yeah, we could rant about this.
But this goes back to the question you asked earlier.
Yeah.
The strike is it's indicative of the shift in consciousness in the American labor movement that we need to restore the strength of unions if we're going to restore a living wage to the average worker. The hotel staff, the people who clean your room need living wages, especially the women who have to lift those damn mattresses. I can't do that. The people who clean the floor, I've seen people talk about the low income, the burger flippers and the hotel staff and the waiters. Excuse me, and the dishwashers. You want to eat off a dirty plate? Those people deserve much higher wages than what we entrust
I
teachers
wouldn't want to do that
and
job, for God's sake.
janitors
Yeah,
and
you'd have to pay
hotel
me a lot
staff.
of money to do that crap, yeah.
The jobs that we entrust them to take care of us. And if
Yeah.
we're not paying them, well, what's wrong with us? Really?
All right, we're running out of time, so I just want to do a final, if you have any other comments about the union, the strike, or writing that we haven't asked, or we haven't talked about, any final comments?
I think I'm unloaded most of it right
All
now.
right.
I wrote a lot. Well, let me say this. I wrote a long screed about this, and it's not a thing that is going away. It is this. We're not enemies. We're supposed to be partners, and the industry has to recognize that. Otherwise, the industry is going to reshape itself. The movie industry has reshaped itself at least a dozen times since it began. Sound was a transition. Color was a transition. In the 50s, widescreen and Technicolor and later on IMAX was a transition. Television was a transition. Going to digital and losing film was a transition. All of these changed the labor picture and the structure. Streaming has been, by the way, the home video VHS, Disney said, oh no, we're not going to make any money off of VHS. And then now home video, the digital market, is their biggest profit source, and they made billions off of DVDs and Blu-rays. And now they're saying, well, we're making so much money off of streaming, we're not going to do physical media in Australia anymore, which is a danger sign future. But a lot of people are discovering, I'm not sure if I want to invest in streaming, because if they lose the license to show something, even though I've already paid for that, so I can watch it whenever I want, it disappears from the server. So I'm a big fan of digital media, physical media, and I will, and things that I download from YouTube so I can have them on the hard disk, they get copied to a disk and they get saved, because YouTube decides to take it away. I don't have it anymore. If I bought something on Prime and they decide they lost their license or no longer want to like, I don't have it anymore, even though so I'm not paying for ownership, I'm paying for rental. You know what? When I buy it, it goes on my shelf. And I had this conversation with my son. I said, after I'm no longer here, you're going to have a great library of music and movies. And you keep that library, because that stuff is going to disappear if some streaming service decides it's no longer profitable to keep. It's like, who wants to watch Enchanted Forest, which is not a great movie, but having it on, it's one of my favorites as a kid. It's like, it might be something that somebody would enjoy one day. Not having the physical media is critical. So the shift in the industry is all about money. It is not about preserving our cultural heritage. And those collectors who are keeping their libraries of physical media, God bless them, because that may be the only place some of that stuff survives. And just library. Like collectors of rare books, library. Oh my God, in Texas, just one of the biggest school district, the head of the school board decided they're going to turn the libraries into teen detention centers.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful?
Because we don't need the libraries.
All right, we can. That's another topic we could spend hours on. Before we go, be sure to tell everyone where they can find you. Tell them about your Patreon page and things like that.
All right, I have a Patreon page, www.patreon.com/David Gerrold, all one word, David Gerrold. And I also have a Facebook page, David Gerrold, 2 words, I think, or maybe it's one, I don't know. My stuff on Facebook is I share a lot of memes and pictures that I think are just It's just stuff that I find fascinating. It's just, what I'm thinking about. And my stuff on Patreon, I share a new I republish a short story every Friday. I do limericks, puns, essays, rants, and pictures of my grandchildren that you're not going to see on Facebook.
And what do you working on now? What do we expect from you? What's the next thing coming up?
Well, I just sold Ganny Goes to War, which is a sequel to Ganny Knits a Spaceship. I sold that to Analog, and it'll be in early 2024, I think the March-April issue. I'm working on another short story for a fantasy anthology. And then I'm going back to work on A Handbasket to Hell. And after that, I am going to, all I need is time to do 3 chapters on Nightmare, A Nest for Nightmares, which is book 5 in the Tor series.
Oh,
and of which most of it is written, and half of book 6 is written, which will be called A Method for Madness. So I have a full plate, but meanwhile, we're also remodeling here. We have 2 more rooms to finish, and then we're putting the house up, and we're moving to Vermont. So why Vermont? The short answer is we'll be happier here in Northridge, okay? Elise has her goals, Sean has his goals. The grandkids have to have good schooling, and I'm tired of dealing with traffic in Los Angeles. There's a lot to love in Los Angeles, but somehow, when I bought my house here 50 years ago, this was a rural neighborhood. Now it's turning into Brooklyn, and with apartment houses everywhere and traffic like you wouldn't believe. And I've just I want to retire and write the book I want. write my last book.
I'm looking forward to having you here on the East Coast, because hopefully that means you'll come to more East Coast conventions.
Yes, I want to go to Boscone and some of the other East Coast conventions, and I know there's a couple. The funny thing is that the Worldcon in 2025 is Seattle, and 2026 might be in Los Angeles, and I'll be on the East Coast. So I was like, I don't want to drive cross country, or and getting me into an airplane. My rule used to. All right, well, okay. My rule used to be I will fly anywhere if I can sit between Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov, but I don't. So, some people would get that. Some people say, "Well, that sounds like a great trip." Yeah.
Except for they never flew. Yes, exactly.
They never flew. No.
They never flew. All right.
All right.
Thanks for those of you who are watching. David is in also. I just, if I can plug myself, on a couple of anthologies I've edited. David has stories in them. So it's great to talk to him again today, and hopefully I'm looking forward to seeing you come to the East Coast. Thank you very much.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate you explaining a lot of this to me. I didn't know a lot of this stuff, so thank you.
All right. Please send me a recording of this.
Absolutely.
I know you recorded it. Please send me. Yeah.
It'll be up on YouTube probably tonight.
And thank Chris too. Well, send me a link or something, or just whatever.
I will. Thank you.
And thank to Christopher for making this happen. And you great smile, Christopher. Nice to thank you. See you soon.